I've been invited in today to talk about the future of learning and how it's changing, the digital transformation of learning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the CEO of the Learning and Performance Institute, and we are a membership body. We accredit organisations, but we also collect an inordinate amount of data, which hopefully will be useful for you today in the next 15 minutes. Much of what you're going to see today is based on the analysis of responses from 600 chief learning officers who've told us how they're approaching digital transformation and the challenges they have. So I need to begin, obviously representing the Learning and Performance Institute, by saying that these are fantastic times for learning. The importance of learning to the business, the opportunities within learning are unprecedented. Learning is definitely no longer perceived as a poor relation. Maybe 5-10 years ago it would have been. It would be the first thing to be cut along with marketing, but that's not the case anymore. People are investing in learning and it's key. Last year the Economist issued a report, and within that there was an incredible endorsement for learning, stating that learning, well, lifelong learning was an economic imperative. We definitely wouldn't have heard that 5 or 10 years ago. Also, and I'm really pleased to hear this, the number one reason why millennials are choosing employers is the learning opportunities within that organisation. That's definitely not the case when I started work. I was looking for the highest salary I could get to pay my rent, but that isn't the case anymore, and people will actively choose to go with an employer if the development opportunities are better and the salary is lower. And that's based on data from Bursin. Interestingly, the fastest growing recruitment site. Any guesses on that? LinkedIn? Yeah? Nope. It's Glassdoor. That's the fastest growing. It's not the most popular, but the way that it's growing is absolutely crazy. And the reason for that, we believe, is that people genuinely care about the culture of the employer. For those of you who don't know, Glassdoor is ex-employees can write about the organisation and current employees can. So what is it really like to work there? How are people developed? What are the challenges facing companies trying to do this? Now, I think that's what people are using now, how they're making their decisions on where to work. But the biggest challenge, and this is the number one piece of data that we got from these CLOs that learning professionals face, is the digital transformation of learning. It's probably the single biggest change, maybe the biggest actually, since e-learning. And why is it such a challenge? Well, the first reason, as we were just hearing, is probably the speed of technological change. A quick question for you. How many years did you think it took for landline phones to hit 50 million users? You don't have to put your hand up, you can have to think about it, I guess. It's early in the morning. 50 million users, you might think, well, yeah, probably 5 to 10 years. TV, how long do you think that would take for 50 million users? 34 years, okay. The rate of adoption of new technologies is frankly astounding. It took 75 years for the landline telephone to reach 50 million users, 13 years for TV, and Angry Birds Space, 35 days. So, how many people have got Angry Birds Space? So it's not you then, it's everybody else. It's always commonplace. I've go to a lot of these events and a lot of industry-wide events where people will use anecdotes about young people and technology, right? And this is my son, Elliot. He was doing a project on the Czech Republic recently, and he was sitting next to me on the sofa. And like a great parent, I said, so what's the capital of the Czech Republic then, Elliot? And he went, yeah, no, I know that, hang on a minute. I've got that, that's Prague, see? And I'm, bearing in mind what I do, I look at him and go, well, you don't know it, do you? That's not knowing it. But he doesn't need to know it. And it's not 11-year-old Elliot that's just saying it either. He's in good company. But I'm the first year in this country of people that were allowed to use a calculator in maths exams. And I doubt we'd look at people using a calculator and think, well, you don't really know maths, you're cheating. It's the same thing, it's the same principle. So Elliot really is similar to Charles Jennings in many ways, who's very much an authority in learning and development. He's saying the same thing. Do we really need to remember it? Do you need to learn it? Or if you've got access to it, is that just as good? I'm not sure about this completely, but it is a significant shift. and it's important to think about whether we agree with it. Is being able to access the answers more powerful than remembering? And what does that mean for learning? So quickly, I'm just going to take you through some of the new roles that we're finding in learning and development, and maybe think about how many of these roles are in your L&D teams at your employer. Community manager. I mean, some of these are roles that just didn't exist only a couple of years ago, and now they're a really key part of FTSE 250 organizations. They're responsible for creating the engagement, collaboration, running networks, engaging teams. Performance consultant. We always get asked at the LPI, we need people who can talk the language of business, and L&D people have been stereotyped in the past as not being able to do that. They've been people who are siloed in learning and development. They've got qualifications in learning and development, and they're people, and really patronizing descriptions like that. Actually, we've just discovered they're a key part of business. They're the reason why talent will go to work at that organization, and why they will stay. Live online learning facilitators, the #1 method of teaching of choice in America for 18 to 25-year-olds. That is the preferred method. How many of you are delivering live online learning, or what you might call virtual classroom training? But it's bite-sized learning. That's what they like. They like 15-minute, 20-minute sessions, but they can access a person. And video production teams. People are spending lots of money on hiring video production teams for learning and development to produce short, sharp video content, maybe from the CEO, from people who are leaders and mentors in the organization. It's a replicable digital asset. I don't need to have the 1.5-hour training session. I can watch the video, and then I can WhatsApp the guy who made the video. Digital content curator. There's a lot of talk, there certainly was on social media yesterday, about curation. There's so much content out there that it's not necessary all the time to create your own content. You can just utilize that. But the appropriation of that content is important. I'll talk about that in a moment. Another role that I haven't put on here is data scientist, which is the kind of fastest growing recruitment role now in L&D. All of these roles are great, but we were talking just there about digital transformation. What are the key drivers for digital learning? Well, first of all, as we just heard, here's what it isn't about. It isn't about reducing headcount. So the organizations that are being really successful with their L&D budgets are actually investing in more people who are doing different roles. Less trainers, more video production, more community managers, more performance consultants. These, according to the research, were the main drivers for digital learning. And while you have a look at those, do remember, content alone can't truly create behavioral change. So we don't have time to go through each one of those, and I think the slide deck's available publicly to everybody else. But there's some great research came out recently. I was talking to somebody here about that just a moment ago. The Fosway research, where we can see the digital learning realities. Now, I'm not going to talk you through all of those, and it's a busy slide. I'm just really showing it you so you can look it up. It's the Fosway research. 71% have started the digital transformation of their L&D function. So, nearly 3/4 already on the way. Video, mobile, and user-generated content are the top 3 areas of demand for content. But I guess the standout stat for me was that only 18% of the focus on L&D effort was on performance. So is it having any impact? Less than a fifth know that. A collective mentality is also needed. A long time ago, 25 years ago, there was a chap called Peter Senge who wrote a book called The Fifth Discipline. And in that book, he talks about, and there's a quote, group problem solving through systems thinking methods, converting companies into learning organizations. And that idea of collective responsibility permeates a lot of the high-level thinking that's available at the moment from organizations like the LPI, Towards Maturity, Bursin, e-Learning Guild. Google research recently also highlighted psychological safety as what makes the best teams. So again, the idea that you can feel comfortable sharing your ideas, be able to say what you think. So I think it's worth reiterating that quote. How many of your organizations are really doing that? And if you did, what do you think would happen? What would change? while the top 10% who are implementing that achieved this. I mean, these are real, this is efficacy, these are real demonstrable impact figures. It's actually impacting the profitability of businesses if they do this. 3 times more likely to report sustained profitability. So what does it mean for L&D teams specifically? How should they react? Well, it's very important, and we just heard it in the last session, that they adapt to this new landscape. So a couple of things to say on here. They need to focus on the business needs, think more strategically. L&D teams will die off, I think we just heard innovate or die, if they're not strategic and part of the business, can talk the language of business, can sit with the CEO and say we need to invest in this and it will impact this. So you start with business performance as a goal. Really important to empower people to learn away from the traditional environments and create a learning culture. We're being asked all the time now at the LPI to go into organizations who've spent thousands on a learning management system and they can't get the cultural adoption of that system. Can you help with that? I mean, it sort of beggars belief, really, because whoever is making those decisions, why aren't you asking those questions? But we're just not used to asking those questions. It's like a panacea. We think that if we buy that, well, that will fix all of that. We've bought the technology. And it isn't the case. Use clickbait titles to get people to access learning. Have a marketing mentality when it comes to people utilizing the learning available to them. It needs to be sold to people, to engage with them. And as I've just mentioned, sharing good content developed by colleagues is incredibly powerful. It is a myth that you need, even though I talked about video production teams, you need to have really high quality video content. Just share mobile content. This is how you do your expenses, and just video the screen, look at it and say a couple of things. If my colleague's doing that, that's really useful for me. I trust them. And that's what's happening in some really successful learning organizations. And provide flexible learning options, so virtual classrooms, access to videos, social platforms. There's a big movement now around resources before courses. But essentially, what we're seeing, and I think I was very pleased to see this on the slide earlier, it's about people. That is the equation that we can draw the conclusion from our research for. The focus needs to be on creating an effective learning and performance culture. And to do that, you utilize both people and technology. If you read the latest World Economic Forum report, they're talking about digital fluency being key, not digital literacy. Being able to utilize technology, fine, but to do what? To achieve what? Why are we going to give everybody a mobile phone? I was asked at the HRD summit a couple of weeks ago, at the end of a presentation, well, that's great that you're saying that, but our people are up telegraph poles and they're fixing things, they're engineers. How are they going to access the content? They don't have mobile phones. What? Oh, to me, the answer is give them mobile phones then, because you're losing more money by them not being able to access the L&D than it costs to give them the phones. And you're going to give it them at the point of need. So the ability to utilize technology to galvanize people and improve performance. And central to this, and I hadn't seen your slide deck, so this is great, is one simple concept, and it's the concept of trust. Learning professionals, your L&D functions need to raise their profile, demonstrate their worth, and talk the language of business. And in order to do that, they need to be trusted by the business. This was probably the second biggest finding of the interviews with 600 chief learning officers. Harold Jarchi last week tweeted, "Don't build around technologies, build around people." And I would echo that. He said, hire an anthropologist, hire a psychologist, listen, watch, learn. Without people, our organizations are nothing.